member for Sudbury.
So the minister is touting a voluntary code that's actually toothless, that's done nothing, because we've just heard them admit that the rates are still going up. So, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to hear from the minister, why is it that they continue to do a lot of talk about actually protecting small businesses and make sure that they're going to do something about merchant fees, but they've refused to act except put in a voluntary code that the small business communities across the country are still saying is toothless and does not do anything to protect them and is costing them $4.2 billion a year. I'd like to hear the minister's response to that.
The Honourable Minister.
As I've said, Mr. Chairman, Canadian consumers deserve access to credit on fair and transparent terms, and that's why we've taken action to protect Canadians using credit cards by strengthening the position of credit card users by imposing a mandatory 21-day interest-free grace period on credit cards, banning unsolicited credit card checks, and requiring consent for credit limit increases. Rather, protecting Canadians using prepaid credit cards with increased transparency and new consumer protection rules banning fees for the first year. Our government also takes the issue of fraud and consumer protection very seriously.
Honourable member for Sudbury.
Let me explain to the minister, Mr. Speaker, that his answer to that was on the consumer side. What we were talking about a minute ago was the small business side. So they really have to get an understanding on which side of the credit card issue we're talking about right now, Mr. Speaker. Because in a recent decision by the Competition Tribunal, they say that credit card processing fees and the practices of Visa and MasterCard are having an adverse effect on competition in the market. They punted the issue back to Parliament for action. So, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to know from the minister, does he agree with the Competition Tribunal that the practices of the credit card companies are indeed anti-competitive? And I'd like to hear an answer on the small business side this time. Thank you.
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the small business sector is extraordinarily important, of course, because it generates more employment than any other sector. And so we are working with the Canadian Federation of Independent Business to look at these important issues. We've made regulations on credit agreements, including lines of credit and credit cards, and these rules limit business practices that are not beneficial to consumers. They require provision of clear and timely information to Canadians about credit products, and we're working with small business to make sure that the impact on small business is appropriate under the competitive circumstances.
Honourable member for Sudbury.
So his initial response was that small businesses are important to this government. Then why did they cut the small business hiring tax credit?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have reduced the tax on small business to 11%, and we've taken other measures that help small business, which is why the Canadian Federation of Independent Business is so supportive of the actions of our government. Keeping taxes low is precisely what small businesses need, and avoiding increases in EI rates is another important factor in protecting jobs across the country.
The Honourable member for Sudbury.
160,000 businesses that actually just lost their opportunity to apply for this tax credit that used this before would agree with the minister. But in terms of lost revenue, can the minister tell us what the estimated annual cost of the hiring credit for small businesses was?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, we've taken a number of steps to produce tax relief for Canadian businesses by reducing the general federal corporate tax to 15% from over 22%, eliminating the federal capital tax, reducing small business rates to 11%, and, of course, increasing the amount of eligible income for the lower rate to $400,000 in 2007 and then $500,000 in 2009. We've increased the lifetime capital gains exemption of qualified small business shares to $750,000, and we've taken steps to reduce the burden, the compliance burden on businesses, reducing the frequency of various tax filings, eliminating retail sales taxes in Ontario, PEI, and harmonization with the...
Okay. The Honourable Member for Sudbury.
Thank you. So the easy answer to that was $225 million each year. But contrasting that the government has no strings attached corporate tax cuts, the estimate of that from the PBO is $1.85 billion. So $225 million to help small businesses, which are creating most of the jobs in this country, or just giving a free-for-all of $1.85 billion. Can the minister explain why they're actually not supporting small businesses in Canada by continuing to cut any type of hiring credits, not acting on any of the merchant fees? It's actually starting to get despicable, Mr. Speaker.
That will be the last question in that round. The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chairman, as I was saying, we've taken a number of steps to reduce tax compliance burden for Canadian businesses. We're amending the Canada-Ontario Tax Collection Agreement to provide for federal administration of Ontario's corporate taxes, implementing administrative and service improvements by the Canada Revenue Agency. We've made tangible progress in implementing the red tape reduction action plan, including the one-for-one rule, which has already saved Canadian businesses 98,000 hours in time spent dealing with red tape. We've frozen EI premiums for 3 years. We've fostered an innovative economy by providing more than $11 billion in new resources to support basic and applied research, talent development, research infrastructure, and innovative ideas.
All right, and that will take us to the next round, and the Honourable Member